to St. John, the 20th chapter. Early on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, and it was still dark. She saw that the stone had been moved away from the entrance. So she ran to Simon Peter and another disciple, the one who Jesus loved, and she said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they've put him." So Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. Both of them were running. The other disciple ran faster than Peter. He reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked at the strips of linen lying there. He did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him, and he went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips lying there. He also saw the funeral cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place. It was separate from the linen. The disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture what Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. But Mary stood outside the tomb crying. She cried. She bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels dressed in white. They were seated where Jesus' body had been. One of them was where Jesus' head had been laid, and the other sat where his feet had been placed. And they asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They've taken my Lord away," she said. "I don't know where they've put him." Then she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. So she said, "Sir, do not carry him away. Tell me where they put him. Then I will go get him." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him, and she cried out in the Aramaic language, "Rabboni." Rabboni means teacher. And Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me. I have not yet ascended to the Father. Instead, go to those who believe in me. Tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news. She said, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. It is good to be here together. It is good to be part of a resurrection faith and celebrate together. And I want to take just a few minutes to hit this account of the very, very first Easter morning. It's early, right? And Mary Magdalene comes all by herself to the place where Jesus was buried. Right? We're cool with this. Very early, probably still a little bit dark, and she's there by herself. We know that she wasn't there to give Jesus a proper burial. Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea had already done that. Joseph bought the tomb, and Nicodemus had all the burial linens and all of the embalming spices to take care of Jesus' body. But Mary comes there early in the morning. She comes early out of devotion to Jesus, and maybe a desire to begin her week in prayer at this place where he was buried. Maybe she was praying for Jesus' soul. Maybe she was praying for the Jesus movement, this new way of living that was just beginning to give people hope. Maybe both. But when she gets there, She sees that the stone had been rolled away, the stone that had sealed this grave. And as she looks inside, she sees that Jesus isn't there. Mary has no idea what happened. She immediately begins to think the worst, right? She immediately begins to think somebody has stolen his body. And she can't find it. And that means that she and the other disciples can't pay homage to their teacher and their friend. So at this point, Mary does what she knows. She runs and tells these other disciples what she's found. And you can almost see the angst and the fear and the hurt that she's carrying with her as she runs to visit those other disciples. Peter and the beloved disciple get up right away and they get into a foot race for the tomb. The beloved disciple gets there first, just sort of glances in. Peter gets there and runs headlong into the tomb. A lot like what you would expect Peter to be doing anyway. And then the other disciple enters as well. The story goes on and it says something to the effect that they believed. So my initial question is, what did they believe? They believed Mary. They believed that the body of Jesus was gone. There wasn't a resurrection faith yet. Verse 9 says, they still do not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. They didn't understand. They couldn't remember it. And so Peter and this other disciple hang their heads and they go home. It's a total crash and burn. They are without hope and they are quickly spiraling into the darkness of depression. The men go home. But Mary stays there. And the beginning of resurrection faith starts right here with her. Mary's emotions are raw, and yet her devotion doesn't shake. Angels are there, right? And they ask her, "Why are you crying, woman?" And Mary answered, "I don't know where they've taken Jesus." She still doesn't quite get it. Her belief is that Jesus' body was stolen so that his followers couldn't pay these proper respects. There is no expectation at this point that God has resurrected Jesus. But then Jesus shows up. And we need to listen very, very carefully to how he speaks to Mary. First, he asks the exact same questions that the angel had asked. "Woman, why are you crying?" And Mary doesn't recognize Jesus. She's not looking for him. She believes him to be this gardener. She doesn't expect to see Jesus alive. This resurrection faith is still in its infancy. Hasn't really taken form yet. Mary isn't seeing with resurrection eyes quite yet. I think that Jesus repeating the angel's question, "Woman, why are you crying?" is reinforcing this absence of joy and elation that are meant to accompany living with resurrection faith. Believe it or not, we experience it all the time. Good things come our way, and we don't recognize them because we don't expect them or we're not looking for something else. We just don't see it. We don't have those resurrection eyes. And then here comes the Jesus move. Jesus gets personal and he says, Mary. And in that, a totally enlightened Mary responds, Rabboni, or teacher. Mary's response is absolutely huge. She's speaking to Jesus and she shows her respect and her devotion and her love. It's almost like what she's saying is, my beloved teacher and friend, it's so great to see you. And finally, just like Mary, we're invited to let go of the unthinkable. Jesus hasn't been stolen or misplaced. God's love, God's transformative power, and desire to bring all people to new life in Jesus has raised Jesus from the dead. Mary then returns to the disciples and says, I have seen the Lord. She has spent time with him. He has called her by name. It's hard even to imagine the look on Mary's face at this point, right? My closest guess would be the look that we get after a long winter and we see those very, very first green buds on trees or flowers that are finally breaking through the earth. Today is God's day. Today is a day of love and earth-shattering new life. Today is about resurrection faith. Today is about God's active love, grace, mercy, and forgiveness raised in our midst in Jesus. Today, we're invited to let go of the unthinkable and live the faithful, believable resurrection